Nobody remembers the name of their baggage handler. They remember delayed flights, lost suitcases, damaged goods, but never the people who move their lives from departure to arrival. Marcus Delacroix understood this invisible contract and had built his post-service life around it. Denver International Airport, Concourse B, baggage crew rotation Delta. Same vest, same boots, same thermos of black coffee that tasted like motor oil but kept him alert during 12-hour shifts. The younger guys called him Gramps, though at 48 he was hardly ancient, but something in his posture, straight-backed, alert, always scanning, made him seem like he'd been watching horizons longer than most. He didn't socialize, didn't attend the crew barbecues, didn't share war stories because the wars he'd fought weren't the kind that made it into stories. His hands, calloused and precise, treated every piece of luggage like it might contain something other than clothes and souvenirs, because in his experience, things that looked innocent usually were, and things that looked suspicious always were worse than they appeared. Until the Christmas morning, when Gate 23's cargo hold evacuation began, when a green duffel bag with no passenger manifest started displaying the telltale signs of a device Marcus had encountered in 6 different countries, and the bomb squad's 30-minute response time became irrelevant because the man they'd dismissed as just another airport worker was already on his knees, tools in hand, dismantling death with the same steady rhythm he'd used to save convoys, checkpoints, and forward operating bases in places where failure meant body bags and international incidents. Welcome to Untold Legends Stories. Before we continue this story of invisible service and deadly expertise, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe stories like this need to be remembered, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who serve in silence. The pre-dawn darkness at Denver International Airport belonged to the forgotten workers. Marcus arrived at 4:15 a.m., parking his rusted Toyota in the employee lot, where security cameras had convenient blind spots. He wore the same outfit every shift: faded jeans, steel-toed boots that had walked through more than just airport terminals, and the mandatory orange reflective vest over a navy work shirt. His employee badge swayed from a retractable cord, showing a photo of a man who looked older than his years, with gray threading through dark hair and eyes that tracked everything but revealed nothing. The baggage handling crew was just arriving, their voices echoing in the cavernous space beneath Concourse B. Young men mostly, talking loudly about weekend plans and complaining about holiday schedules. They nodded to Marcus, but rarely engaged him in conversation. Over 3 years, he'd perfected the art of being present, but unmemorable. "Morning, Gramps," Tommy Rodriguez called out, a 23-year-old with sleeve tattoos and pilot aspirations. "Ready for another thrilling day of moving rich people's luggage?" Marcus grunted acknowledgement, already reviewing the overnight logs. Flight manifests, security alerts, weather delays, paperwork that most colleagues skimmed through. But Marcus read every line, cross-referenced every anomaly, processed information with the methodical precision of someone for whom missing details had once meant missing soldiers. Dave Morrison, the shift supervisor, watched Marcus work with familiar puzzlement. 3 years without a sick day, complaint, or mistake. Efficiency ratings that made everyone else look lazy. But the man remained an enigma. No emergency contacts, no social media presence, no workplace friendships. Just a social security number, a clean background check, and work performance that defied explanation. The first international flight wouldn't arrive for 2 hours. But Marcus began his daily ritual, walking through each aircraft cargo hold with the systematic thoroughness of someone conducting a security sweep. His eyes tracked loading procedures, noted which crew members cut corners, observed luggage placement patterns that most people would consider random, but he recognized as potentially significant. That morning felt different. Not obviously, not in any way he could articulate to Morrison or the crew. Just a tension in the air. The kind of atmospheric pressure change that experienced soldiers learned to trust even when they couldn't explain it. Flight 847 from Frankfurt was the first to arrive. Its cargo hold filled with the usual holiday mix: tourist souvenirs, business equipment, family gifts wrapped in customs declarations. Marcus worked alongside Tommy and two others, but his attention operated on multiple levels, processing the immediate task while cataloging passenger manifests, noting irregular luggage, scanning for the subtle indicators that separated routine from dangerous. The green military-style duffel bag caught his attention not because it looked suspicious, but because it looked professionally invisible. Positioned in the cargo hold's corner, secured with non-standard bungee cords, heavy in a way that suggested contents beyond clothing or personal items. Most workers would have processed it without a second glance. Marcus knelt beside it, not touching, just observing. The fabric showed wear patterns consistent with military transport rather than civilian travel. The zipper pulls had been replaced with paracord loops, modification that allowed quick access in emergency situations. Corner stress marks indicated repeated airdrops, and beneath everything else, a faint chemical smell that triggered memories from places where American soldiers weren't supposed to be operating. "Yo, Gramps!" Tommy's voice cut through his analysis. "You planning to marry that bag or help us finish this load?" Marcus stood slowly, decision crystallizing. "Take your lunch break," he said quietly. "What? It's barely 8:30, man," Tommy replied, confused. "All of you, take your break now," Marcus repeated, his voice carrying unexpected authority. Something in Marcus's tone made Tommy pause. The older man had never given orders, never raised his voice, never displayed authority. But the command presence was unmistakable, carrying weight that had nothing to do with airport hierarchy. Okay," Tommy said uncertainly. "Come on, guys. Coffee break." As the cargo hold emptied, Marcus found himself alone with the duffel bag and a growing certainty that his carefully constructed civilian life was about to end. The bag was humming, so faintly that only someone trained to recognize electronic signatures would notice. Digital timer, probably sophisticated, almost certainly connected to enough explosive material to turn Concourse B into a memorial site. He pulled out a cell phone he'd carried for 3 years without using and dialed a number memorized but never called. "This is Watchdog," he said when the connection established. "Potential package situation, Denver International, Concourse B, Cargo Hold 7, requesting immediate assessment." The voice responding was professional, calm. "Watchdog, confirm status and location." "Deep cover civilian contractor, 3 years in position," Marcus replied quietly. "Package shows professional placement signatures. Chemical markers consistent with previous Theater Bravo and Charlie encounters. Stand by for instructions. Do not engage without authorization," the handler ordered. Marcus closed the phone. Authorization was a luxury for people who hadn't learned that some decisions couldn't wait for committee approval. The bag's humming was growing more pronounced, which meant timer activation was progressing according to schedule. His hands moved to his tool belt, finding wire cutters he'd carried every day for 3 years. Standard baggage equipment, officially. Insurance against days like today, unofficially. The cargo hold's main lighting flickered as emergency protocols activated somewhere in the terminal's security center. That's when he noticed he wasn't alone. A TSA agent had entered the cargo hold, young woman with regulation posture and alert eyes that reminded Marcus of soldiers he'd trained in forward operating bases. She saw the duffel bag, saw Marcus kneeling beside it, and her hand moved instinctively toward her radio. "Sir, step away from the luggage," Agent Rodriguez commanded. "We have a security situation developing." Marcus looked up at her, recognizing the type, competent, well-trained, following protocols that would get everyone in the terminal killed. "Agent, I need you to initiate immediate evacuation of Concourse B," he said calmly. "Full civilian evacuation, emergency services response, bomb squad activation." Her eyes narrowed. "Sir, I need you to step away from the bag and identify yourself." "Agent Rodriguez," Marcus read her name tag. "In about 23 minutes, that bag is going to detonate with enough force to collapse this section of the terminal. The bomb squad response time is 30 minutes minimum. I can prevent that from happening, but I need you to trust me and evacuate civilians now." Rodriguez stared at him, her training warring with instinct. Something in Marcus's voice carried absolute certainty, the kind of calm authority that came from experience with similar situations. "How do you know about explosives?" she asked suspiciously. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he opened the duffel bag with movements so practiced, so precise, that Rodriguez found herself holding her breath. Inside was confirmation of everything he'd suspected: military-grade plastic explosive, digital timing device, and underneath it all, a message written in block letters: "For the soldiers who never came home." "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez whispered, staring at the device. "Agent, you have a choice," Marcus said without looking up from the bomb. "Follow protocol and watch 3,000 people die, or trust that I know what I'm doing and get them out of here." Rodriguez looked at the device, at Marcus's steady hands, at the timer showing 21 minutes and 47 seconds. Then she activated her radio. "Control, this is Rodriguez. Initiating emergency evacuation, Concourse B, all gates. Potential explosive device confirmed. Requesting immediate bomb squad response and federal backup." The terminal's intercom system crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a security situation, we are implementing precautionary evacuation procedures for Concourse B. Please proceed calmly to designated exits and follow airport personnel instructions." Marcus had already begun working, his fingers tracing wiring patterns that seemed familiar despite the device's sophistication. Professional construction, military-grade components, but designed by someone who understood both explosives and psychology. This wasn't random terrorism. This was a message intended to expose classified operations, to force acknowledgement of soldiers who'd died in places the Pentagon denied existed. The main power grid switched to emergency mode, red strobing lights making precision work nearly impossible. Marcus pulled out a small LED flashlight, another piece of standard equipment that most baggage handlers didn't carry, and focused the beam on the device's central processing unit. Rodriguez watched him work, her radio crackling with updates from the evacuation. "Sir, who are you?" she asked quietly. Marcus didn't look up from the device. "Someone who's done this before." "Where?" Rodriguez pressed. "Places that don't exist on maps," Marcus replied tersely. The timer showed 18 minutes and 12 seconds when footsteps echoed through the cargo hold. The bomb squad had arrived, their heavy equipment clanging against metal walkways as they approached the device. "Civilian, step away from the explosive," the bomb squad leader shouted. "We have EOD specialists on scene." Marcus continued working, his third wire cut isolating the backup power source. The timer flickered, but continued counting down. Multiple redundancies, just like devices he'd encountered in places where American soldiers weren't supposed to die. "Sir, this is your final warning," the leader called out. "Step away from the device." Rodriguez positioned herself between Marcus and the bomb squad. "He's been working on it for 10 minutes, she explained to the team. The device is more complex than standard protocols can handle. The lead EOD technician, a woman whose voice carried familiar authority, approached the device. Staff Sergeant Patricia Chen, according to her name tape. She examined Marcus's work, noting the precise cuts, the systematic approach to disarmament. "Those wire cuts," Chen said quietly. "That's not civilian training. That's military EOD procedure." Marcus made his final cut, grounding residual electrical charge while severing the connection between timer and detonator. The display went dark. The humming stopped. Emergency lighting stabilized as the device powered down completely. "Device neutralized," Chen announced into her radio. "No explosive signature detected. Civilian contractor successfully disarmed military-grade IED." Marcus stood slowly, his knees protesting 20 minutes of precise work under extreme pressure. Chen studied his face, recognition dawning gradually. "I know you," she said thoughtfully. "Iraq, 2008. Forward Operating Base Martinez. You were the contractor who disappeared after that classified operation went sideways." Marcus met her eyes briefly, then shook his head. "I think you're mistaken." But Chen wasn't buying it. Her gaze dropped to his hands, noting scars that came from handling explosives. Steadiness that came from disarming death under fire. "Martinez," she said quietly. "Rodriguez Martinez. Best EOD tech I ever worked with. Saved more lives than anyone will ever know because most of his operations were classified above top secret." Before Marcus could respond, federal agents arrived with airport security and Supervisor Morrison. The cargo hold swarmed with investigators demanding explanations for how a baggage handler had disarmed a sophisticated explosive device that would have stumped most military specialists. Marcus gave them the story he'd rehearsed. Former Army mechanic, basic electrical training, desperate instinct when faced with potential catastrophe. Nothing about classified operations or specialized training that existed in no official records. But Chen kept watching him, her expression thoughtful. After the initial questioning ended and investigators began processing the scene, she approached him one final time. "Staff Sergeant Chen," she introduced herself formally, extending her hand. "EOD specialist, currently attached to Denver Homeland Security." Marcus shook it. "Marcus Delacroix, baggage handler." "Right." She studied his weathered face. "You know, I worked with a contractor in Iraq. Guy named Martinez. Same methodical approach to disarmament, same instinct for recognizing device signatures. This Martinez was the best I ever saw. Could disarm anything, worked alone, disappeared into civilian life after his last operation was compromised." Marcus turned to leave, but Chen's voice stopped him. "Martinez always said the best EOD techs were invisible, the ones who did their job and faded back into whatever cover they were maintaining." Marcus looked back over his shoulder. "Sounds like a professional." "He was. Hope he found peace in whatever life he built afterward." As federal agents continued their investigation, Supervisor Morrison caught up with Marcus near the employee exit. "Delacroix, what the hell just happened? How did you know how to defuse a bomb?" Marcus paused, keys to his Toyota in hand. "Sometimes you do what needs to be done." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I can give." Morrison stared at him, processing 3 years of efficient work, unexplained expertise, and careful anonymity. Federal agents are going to want extensive interviews, media attention, background investigations. You ready for that level of scrutiny? Marcus opened his car door. "I've been ready for 3 years." That evening, as investigators discovered that the bomb components traced back to defense contractors with classified program connections, Marcus sat in his one-bedroom apartment, reviewing options. His cover was compromised. His carefully constructed civilian identity was dissolving under federal investigation. Time to activate protocols he'd hoped never to use. He made a call from the burner phone that had connected him to his handlers. "This is Watchdog. Package neutralized, but cover is blown. Requesting extraction and reassignment." The response was immediate. "Copy, Watchdog. Vehicle en route. Safe house prepared. New identity, ready for activation." Marcus packed efficiently. 1 duffel bag, essential documents, no personal items that couldn't be replaced. 3 years of civilian life reduced to materials that would fit in an overhead compartment. His phone buzzed with a text from Staff Sergeant Chen. "Martinez, if that's really you, thank you for everything. Stay invisible." Marcus deleted the message and powered down the phone for the last time. 20 minutes later, a black SUV picked him up from the apartment complex parking lot. No neighbors witnessed his departure. No forwarding address was left with the management company. By morning, the lease would be terminated and the apartment cleaned as if Marcus Delacroix had never existed. As Denver's lights faded in the rear window, Marcus reviewed his next assignment. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Different terminal, same mission. Somewhere in America's transportation infrastructure, another invisible guardian was needed. Another place where failure meant civilians didn't go home to their families. The handler riding beside him passed him a new identity packet. Daniel Morrison, maintenance supervisor, impeccable background, designed to provide access and anonymity in equal measure. "Your new position starts Monday," the handler explained. "Same mission parameters, same operational security requirements, same understanding that success means nobody remembers you were there." Marcus nodded, already visualizing SeaTac's layout, processing security protocols, planning how to become invisible again in a different environment. Some soldiers served tours of duty. Others served lifetime sentences of vigilance, moving from post to post, carrying their wars with them long after official hostilities ended. 3 days later, Daniel Morrison reported for his first shift at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. He wore different clothes, carried different identification, but his eyes moved with the same systematic alertness. Airport workers nodded politely to the new maintenance supervisor, but didn't engage him in conversation. He preferred it that way. In Denver, federal investigators concluded that the Christmas morning bomb had been placed by domestic terrorists with access to military-grade explosives. The device had been disarmed by a baggage handler with military training who'd since disappeared, leaving behind only speculation and an empty apartment. Staff Sergeant Chen filed her report noting that the civilian contractor had demonstrated advanced EOD capabilities but declined to provide detailed background information. She didn't mention her suspicions about Rodriguez Martinez or classified operations that officially never happened. Marcus Delacroix was listed as a person of interest who'd vanished before extensive questioning could be conducted. Daniel Morrison began his career in Seattle with no connection to Denver events, just another maintenance worker in America's vast transportation security apparatus. Nobody remembers the name of their baggage handler. They remember delayed flights, lost luggage, security delays that inconvenience their travel plans. They don't remember the people who move through airports, train stations, and government buildings with trained eyes and steady hands, watching for dangers that most civilians can't imagine. That's exactly how the Invisible Guardians prefer it. Recognition is for heroes who work in spotlight. The real security comes from people who blend into background noise, carrying skills that officially don't exist, serving in places where failure isn't an option and gratitude isn't expected. Now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Marcus? Someone whose presence you barely noticed, whose background remained mysterious, but whose vigilance kept you safe? Share their story in the comments below, because here at Untold Legend Stories, we believe the most important guardians are the ones who never ask to be remembered. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, Subscribe and share it with someone who needs to understand that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear reflective vests and carry wire cutters, standing watch in places where the only reward for success is the chance to remain invisible. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, remember, some of us are always watching, even when you don't see us.